Good afternoon, everybody. The World Economic Forum have just made a promotion and propaganda video for 15-minute neighbourhood cities, and they're using Paris as the next example of when they want to implement these things. You've heard of them being implemented in the UK, in Oxford and Canterbury and London. But this is their promotional video. Have a look at this nonsense here. So there you go. That's the World Economic Forum's video to promote 15-minute cities around the world. They started with Paris, but then they also mentioned Melbourne, Australia, and Milan, and I'm sure other places would want to do that as well, and the World Economic Forum would want other places to do that. Now, it makes it look like a wonderful utopia is going to be created. But it isn't, because in 15-minute cities with 15-minute neighbourhoods, you won't be able to get around unless you walk or you cycle. As you saw there, they want to turn 60,000 car parking spaces in Paris into what? I don't know. Green parks, or put benches in with the road or something, so that you can't park your car outside your apartment or your house or your flat, which means that for local people who've always been able to get around in a car, they're not going to be able to do so. And from the very beginning, they said the aim of this is to cut car use, but it's not by giving you better options. It's just by making life so excruciatingly awful and awkward and difficult and expensive to have a car, and more hassle to have a car in cities than not to have a car, that most people will just get rid of them because they can't use them. Or if you need to use the car, you'll move out to the countryside where you'll be able to use a car because you won't be able to use it in the cities. So they talk about rethinking and redesigning cities. Now, I don't need our country, our cities, our towns, our villages, or anything to be redesigned or rethought or reimagined or reset. They're perfectly fine as they are. Of course, there are some problems, but they're not going to be solved by a whole technocratic redesign, which is completely undemocratic and circumvents normal democracy and the normal rule of the people, which is what democracy says. When they have tried to implement these in the UK, or they're trying at the moment to implement this in Oxford. This is really the point of the sword this year, Oxford. They have done a consultation as to who wanted their city to be divided into 6 zones that you couldn't travel between with a car unless you get permission from the council, and then you can only do it on 100 days per year, and if you do it any other time you get a huge fine. 92% of people said they didn't want it, but they said they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. And this is how democracy is being circumvented. People get in to positions of power on a certain manifesto, whatever. Then they say they're going to do something completely different that people didn't know they were going to do or they didn't vote for. Then they have a consultation. Then they just ignore the consultation. It's worse in places like Paris and London, potentially, because they have directly elected mayors who have total control vested in one person over the transport network of a city. Although, in Oxfordshire, in Oxford, it's still pretty bad. There's a council there still, but they're still trying to implement it. Paris, Melbourne, Milan, which were mentioned in the video, and London as well, are part of something called the C40 Cities network. Now, when that started, there were just 40 cities. Now there's 96 cities in that network around the world. They are larger or important cities that have a directly elected mayor. And what they say their aim is or what they are, they describe themselves as a global network of mayors taking urgent action to confront the climate crisis. Yeah, well, you know what I think of the climate crisis from other things I've said in other places. But this is what these directly elected mayors in Paris and other places are trying to do. They are completely in allegiance with the World Economic Forum, the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and Agenda 2030. And they are pushing to implement Agenda 2030 wherever they are. And that means creating 15-minute cities and making life very, very much harder or impossible even for people, normal people who have a car, because you won't be able to drive around and you won't be able to park outside your flat. That is the plan, and that is the propaganda and the promotion coming from the World Economic Forum. So they're very much putting this out there. You've got the sort of advanced guard in Oxford, in London, in Canterbury. Now they're rolling this out around the whole world. So it'll be other cities in the UK, cities in the USA, cities in Australia, Europe, everywhere. They will be trying to do this and to make owning a car almost impossible. So having a car is freedom, essentially. And especially having a petrol or a diesel car, it gives you even more freedom because you don't have a car that can be remotely switched off by the manufacturers and which you can't recharge if there's no electricity around. We want to keep cars, and we want to be able to use cars as we always have been able to do. There's absolutely no good reason for implementing all of these anti-car measures, except for the people who are in the vanguard of complete societal change, who want to get rid of cars so that we won't be able to move around so freely. We will be monitored and we will be surveilled and we'll be forced to live in these horrible carbuncles in smart cities that they're putting all around the world. That's not a future I want. Now, I have got no say in what happens in Paris because I'm in the UK. Hopefully, the people in Paris will vote in a different mayor who will allow people to continue being free and will get rid of these anti-car measures. In the UK, there's elections in London again in 2024. So I hope that the people of London will vote out Sadiq Khan. The Heritage Party will be standing this year in local elections all over England. which are very, very important because it's the local districts and boroughs and counties that make decisions over these kind of things in your local neighbourhoods. Whether you have 15-minute zones, whether you have a council that puts in roadblocks everywhere and makes life hard for you if you got a car, or whether you have a council that allows you to continue using your car and doesn't impede you from just going about your business as an individual or as a businessman or businesswoman, shop owner or a trader or a carer or an ambulance driver or a taxi driver or whatever. All these different groups of people need to be able to drive around freely just to do their normal business. So we support ordinary people being able to go about their business without Agenda 2030 or 15-minute cities and 15-minute neighbourhoods getting in their way. So as the year goes on next year, we need to stand up against this idea wherever it raises its ugly head.